All right, and here we are reviewing Candyman. And so I'm going to do a non-spoiler section of this film before I get into just talking about the spoilers overall. And so what I want to say about this film to start off is it is a beautifully shot movie. I feel like they changed a lot of the lore of Candyman, of what was said in the original, but it worked for the most part of this movie. For the longest part of the runtime, this movie works, and everything that they're trying to execute with bringing and introducing Candyman to a new generation, with telling the story of wrongly accused and handled black men by the police. And the key thing here is that they do so well, in my opinion, with this film, is that they put you in the mind of the character. The main character, played by Yahya, and his name is Anthony. They do a really good job at showing him from his point of getting aware of the legend of Candyman to his interest growing and him trying to use it with his work. And then at one point, not heavy spoilers, but his work kind of gets critiqued or whatever. And then this whole thing, and it's done very, very well. I also think another thing that they do is that they do a great job at these characters who, a lot in this movie, there's really one character who is aware of who Candyman is. Well, two, because then again, the main character, Tony, his girlfriend's brother, is also kind of aware of the legend beforehand. But most of these characters in here aren't really familiar with the legend of Candyman. But the thing that they do great is that they still show that even with not being aware, that it makes them afraid, or they're hesitant to even say the name in the mirror, which goes with a lot of urban legends. They do a great job at just continuing that thing of Candyman being this urban legend. They really make it more of a straightforward type villain than what it was in the previous movies, and I'll talk a little bit about that more in the spoiler part of this conversation. But another thing that I think this movie does great is the kills. Now, there's a trope that they use for some of the kills that I feel like could have gotten left after the first couple of ones, but I think the kills are very interesting. They're very, I wouldn't say necessarily inventive. They're not doing anything that's crazy, brand new or unseen before, anything like that. But I think that the kills are very effective as well in this movie. And we, just like the original Candyman, we don't get a lot of kills. We get more than the original, but like I said, they're very inventive. Whereas, the Candyman in the original, those kills are kind of straightforward. They weren't these really creative kills. This one makes it a little bit more creative. I also like how they tell the story of the original, and they kind of make you think that maybe they're retconning a little bit, because they tell the story of, Helen and the fact that she cut the head off a dog and she was doing snow angels in the blood. But again, to go off that thing of urban legend, this is spoilers for the original, not for this one, but we find out that no, the way that we saw it happen in the original movie is exactly how it happened in this one. But the story of Helen and her what happened to her, the way that it was told, was basically made her the villain in the movie rather than the actual Candyman. And so it's a lot of great ideas done in this movie, where I think that it fails some at is that those ideas don't always come together very well, I don't think. And like I said, in my opinion, they don't always come together very well. And a lot of times, in certain parts of this movie, something just feels a little bit off from what was told before it, or what was shown before it. But overall, I think this movie was very effective in the story that it was trying to tell, in highlighting the fact of gentrification. And they have a very good point of not only do other races benefit off, or white people benefit off gentrification, but artists benefit off of it. They take advantage of the lower cost of living. They move in. They use the stories of those areas to tell their art, or to create their art and everything like that. Another thing with a great perception and perspective given to this film and the characters in it. So overall, I think, like I said, this movie does a great job in most of what it's trying to tell you. So now, I can't really get what I want to get into it too much without the spoiler section of this. So we're going to go ahead. We're going to get into our spoiler section. Repeat, we're going to head into spoilers. So if you do not want to be spoiled for this movie right now, then go ahead and turn off this podcast. Come back to this mark. But we're going to get into spoilers now. One of the biggest issues that I have with this film is some of the ways that it changes the Candyman lore. For example, one of the biggest changes, the biggest change probably to the Candyman character in this, is that they are now depicting Candyman as basically this vengeful spirit that takes over, inhabits the bodies, and gains the appearance of wrongly killed black men. Now, that is completely different than what was told in the original. Yes, Daniel Robitaille was wrongly killed, but it was him. It was his physical appearance that you saw. And I feel like a lot of they didn't want to use Tony Todd because of how different he looks from back then and everything, which is understandable. But they should have doubled. The thing that I said that I feel like they could have gotten away with it is that Candyman's face is shown so seldom in this movie that the few times that they do see it, they could have used a CGI version of Tony Todd's face if they wanted to keep it the original Candyman. To me, making the story of Candyman be that it takes the appearance of these different people. So, for example, the most of the time in this movie, we are seeing the version of Candyman that is a character by the name of Sherman, who was another guy with a hook who kind of was dressed like Candyman, but was wrongly killed because they suspected him of passing out candy with razor blades. When it ended up after he was murdered, they still find more candy with razor blades, but he is he's hiding after he's wrongly, being looked at or whatever, and he's killed by the police. They swarm him, they beat him to death, and now the Candyman has his appearance for the majority of this movie. Now, where that gives a couple of issues at, especially for me, is that happened in I believe that was supposed to be the 1980s, where Sherman was wrongly killed and became the new Candyman. The original Candyman movie happens in 1992, and he still had the appearance of Tony Todd. So now making the Candyman character this vengeful spirit, kind of superhero, avenger of black people type character, is not really what Candyman was. And another thing that they take away from the Candyman here is his personality. When I said earlier that they make him more of a straightforward horror villain, it's because he doesn't talk in this movie. He gives sinister smile to a kid at one point in time, but he really just shows up, kills, and gets the fuck out. Candyman had such a personality in the original one. He was trying to seduce Helen. What was the thing that he kept saying? Be my victim. He could have killed her at any time, but he wanted to seduce her. He wanted her to willingly come over and be his victim and help his legend go. We get that hero shot of Candyman in the original, of him coming in the garage. We get nothing like that with this Candyman because they want to make him more of a straightforward character. And I think that, in my opinion, we always like to fantasy book or couch quarterback movies like this, is that they didn't really need to do that. Like I said, for the reasons that I laid out, Sherman's face is not really shown through much of this movie. They could have kept it the Tony Todd character. Maybe that for Tony Todd to come back in full power, he needed to take over the body of Anthony. There's so much that they could have done and kept the story basically the same. The gentrification storyline could have stayed the same, but by making it now this character that has taken over and it's not even just him and Sherman. We find out that Sherman is one of many Candy men, as well as the original Daniel Robitaille. And that it creates some logic problems for me in this. So now is like Candyman's supposed to be this, like I said, this vengeful spirit. They also changed some of the lore in which people can finish you saying Candyman. So before, you had to say Candyman 5 times. We see 2 times in this movie where the characters don't say Candyman for the 5th time. It's said by somebody else, but Candyman still comes. And also, Candyman doesn't kill the people who say his name. Outside of... So Anthony and Anthony's girlfriend both say his name. They don't get murdered. Candyman doesn't come after them at all. As a matter of fact, and this is something that I've seen this movie twice now, Candyman does not kill a single black person in this movie. So again, they're doubling down on that avenger of black people type thing. And that brings some, like I said, some issues with the original to me. And I know some people are saying that, they're fine with it. And I even said in my initial tweet after seeing this movie, I think a sequel to this film could be even better than this. I hope that they continue this. It's just that right now with this movie and the fact that they connected it so heavily to their original, it just really feels like they wanted to give us that fan service moment of Tony Todd appearing. And that's really the only reason he's in. We only get his voice and a brief appearance of him for seconds. And that's why they kind of locked it in with the first when they really didn't need to do that. They could have recast him. I know that would have sucked. Or like I said, in what my opinion on it could have been, is that they could have just not shown his face, and it could have been supposed to be the Tony Todd Candyman. And also, they introduced this trope of Candyman can only be seen through reflection. So even if you say his name while he's killing you, you don't see him. That was not done in the original at all. Helen was able to see him not just through a reflection. Now, I don't think in that film anybody else was able to see Candyman except the people that said his name and Helen. I believe that was the case. But making it to where even the people he's attacking can't see him it made for some interesting kills. We get a kill with this curator in her office after having this conversation with Anthony, and he leaves, or in her apartment, and we kind of zoom out from the apartment building and see her just lift up and like dragged across the mirrors. We're like seeing like into all these people's apartments. Really interesting kill. Like I said, the kills are really good. But that was something that also stuck out to me. But the biggest issue that I have with this film is the ending. It really feels like there were like 15 minutes cut out of this film to rush it to, maybe it was a studio mandated time limit. Maybe they didn't feel like something in that third act didn't work correctly, so it was better to remove it and kind of just jump into it. But it really feels like this film just gets to a conclusion that it was going to get to, and it kind of cuts out. It's left as like a weird edit because we see the main character in Anthony, and he had got stung by this bee, and we solely see like this body horror element introduced, which is really cool as well, of his body transforming and changing. And by the end of the film, it's like taking over the whole side of his body, and he goes to Cabrini Green, and then we just stop seeing him. Next thing we know, he pops up. He's with this character named Burke, who owned this laundromat, who was giving Anthony information on the Candyman myth or whatever. And Anthony is like snapped. He wants to bring Candyman back. He understands that Anthony was the child that Candyman kidnapped, which is another plot point. Vanessa Williams comes back in this movie. And then we just see Tony sitting there getting his arm cut off, and he's just sitting there allowing it to happen. Now, a tear does come down his eye to show that he is feeling it, but it just really felt, it was jarring in the movie, in my opinion, to just rush to that conclusion. It really feels like they wanted to get to the ending. They wanted to get to the point of Anthony becoming Candyman, but they cut out a lot of what could have made this movie and this runtime feel a little bit better. And it's a fairly short movie. It's like right at 90 minutes. Adding another 15 to 20 minutes really wouldn't have made this movie too long, in my opinion, especially if it helps get you to your ultimate ending. And that's where this movie fails so much for me. We see Anthony become the Candyman, the new Candyman. He has a hook now in his hand, and he's killing the cops. But then, as I said, his face transforms into the original, which again is a plot hole in my opinion, because we've been seeing another character named Sherman who had been operating as the Candyman, and he never became or looked or took over the appearance of the Tony Todd, Daniel Robitaille Candyman. So it's just some logic holes and some things that felt rushed in an overall film that is written, directed, and is a solid good movie. I wouldn't call it great. I hope that they continue this franchise. I would love to see Anthony and Yaya portray the new Candyman, and hopefully that's the route that they go with this. And I really think that, if they get back into showing some personality and having Candyman talk and interact and toy with his victims, it could be great. Or if they do want to just make Candyman this Avenger, this slasher, this more straightforward horror villain, it can work in that sense too, but they have to commit now. They've now set up their own lore. Now they can build upon it with the second film and hopefully kind of distance themselves more from the original as it gets better and goes. This movie is great. First #1 film in the country, directed by a Black woman, so shout out to that. It's breaking ground there. But overall, I just feel like this is a really good movie with a rushed ending that left it feeling a little bit hollow, in my opinion, in my view. I've seen the movie 2 times. But that's it. That's my review of Candyman. Let me know how you guys feel about it. If you agree or disagree with my assessment of the ending of the film, you can follow us collectively at the Film Bros Pod. You can send at the Film Bros. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, thefilmfrequencypod@gmail.com. If you want to follow me solo, you can do so at CEO Haize, at CEO Haize. This has been another episode of the Film Frequency. Thank you so much for supporting me, film family. I'll see you guys in just a couple of days with my review of Shang-Chi. Peace.